Welcome back to another episode of Psycosmos. Today we're going to have Carlos here. He is going to chat with us a little bit about different types of things revolving around the Zodiac and potentially even music. Stay tuned for more. So, Carlos, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. If you want, give everybody a little tidbit about yourself.
All right. Yeah, I'm a musician, music producer based out of New York City, and I've been into astrology and the occult ever since I was in high school, and especially astrology over the last decade or so. And during the pandemic, I decided to start making content based around my love for astrology, mostly just to share my personal perspective on things because I've been using astrology for my own personal benefit for so long, and I like to think that it's been working for me. So I've been wanting to share my experience and my views and my approaches, and hopefully it can help some people. Definitely don't consider myself a master or an expert astrologer. I just consider myself somebody who's very fascinated with the subject, who has spent a lot of time with it and a lot of time experimenting with it on a personal level and reading about it. And I think because of some of my social media, primarily on TikTok as the RoyalCusp. I think that's how we've gotten in touch,
Mm-hmm.
and that's who I am. I'm a musician who loves astrology, pretty much.
I love that. Yeah, thanks for the little elevator pitch too, because I was wondering if you wanted to plug your TikTok. Carlos's TikTok is the Royal Cusp. He's got about 80K followers, and he was actually one of the more in tune Zodiac accounts that I started following back a number of months ago. I really like a lot of different Zodiac videos on TikTok, especially since we've been building up our platform on there as well. Just been trying to have a lot of outreach, especially when it comes to sharing more of the esoteric information and wisdoms. And because of the way that the algorithm works, I just ended up stumbling upon Carlos's channel, and I went through a whole ton of his videos, and I said, "Wow, this guy really knows his stuff." So you're definitely very humble. I can tell you that, because I would consider that you have a very in-depth view. Anybody who's bringing up natal charts or anything like zodiacal charts of future days to come, or just using other people's birthdays to make similar draw similar lines in the sand between different energies or different attributes, that's like very impressive. Not a lot of people, I feel, are doing that on the different social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, etc. I feel as
Yeah,
though the mass majority of them are more revolved around reading specific charts. You know, people doing lives, they come in, they say, "Oh, can you do my chart?" Or they'll take payments online and stuff. Whereas more of Carlos's work was like, "Hey, this is what you can expect to come for the next week. If you have these types of energies, you might be able to expect this." And I found a lot of your information and research was very accurate, just because of all the readings that I've done. I'm a really big advocate of some of the people I like are like Ptolemy, and then there's also there's the Theosophist Societies, which kind of sprung up in the late 1800s. They brought back a lot of the wisdoms revolving around stars and whatnot.
yeah.
A lot
That's
of
that's more my school of thought. The,
yeah,
the Alice Baileys
Alice
and
Bailey,
and the
exactly.
Blavatskys of the world.
Yeah, that's a great topic for conversation too, because I hear a lot of different sides of the argument for both aisles, just on mainly any topic. It doesn't matter
Right.
what topic it is. And one of the things that people criticize about Theosophists the most, mainly, is how, I would say, how in tune they were, which, is kind of a catch-22. A lot of people consider Alice Bailey and some of their works to be a little far-fetched, but honestly, if you go and you do the research, you'll find that they were onto a lot of things. And for somebody who had these types of wisdoms and information in like the late 1800s is extremely impressive. Those works ended up inspiring people like Manly P. Hall. And
Totally.
one of the people that I really enjoy that's kind of lesser known is The Light of Egypt by Thomas Burgoyne. He was one of these guys who was really believed to be one of the main leaders of these types of theosophical organizations, not necessarily the Theosophists in general, but like he was tied to them in a whole wide. He was tied to Masonry and the Rosicrucians, and he was just kind of like this random guy who was with a pen name. He also went by the name Zanoni. So he wrote this book, The Light of Egypt, which I've actually taken a ton of wisdom and information from, and I realized a lot of other people throughout the last 100 or so years have also taken a ton of information from. But
Does that book have another name?
yeah, so The Light of Egypt is the two volumes. I think it's the Science of the Soul and
Okay,
the
yeah.
Science of the Soul and the
It sounded
Stars.
familiar. I couldn't because I remember hearing The Light of Egypt, but I remember looking at a book called The Science of the Soul and the Stars.
Yeah,
Kind of
yep.
sound, but I need to get back into that because that sounds really fascinating, and
That
I
was,
definitely got to get into that.
yeah, for sure. That one was one of the better books that I had ever read on just zodiatry in general.
Awesome.
It's a very tough read, but it's well worth it. If you make it through, you
Yeah.
start learning. He starts making parallels between different planetary objects and different gods of mythology, and
Right.
more advanced than what most people would know, and also just like different attributes and archetypes that a lot of people weren't really talking about, and I think a lot of people pulled from his works. And again, not a lot of people even know who he was. He was
Right.
again one of these kind of mysterious figures that dropped a ton of wisdom and then just disappeared. So that seems to be a very common trend, like right around pre World War One era, post American Civil War, right
Right.
between the Civil War and World War One. There was all these people who kind of just sprang up out of nowhere, and Nikola Tesla is another great example. These people just came out of the woodwork completely unsurprisingly out of nowhere during that time, and then they dropped all this wisdom, and then they just kind of vanished,
Yeah.
into the line,
They left a
um,
lot for us to sift through and analyze and
yeah,
debate, and it's a beautiful thing. It really is.
yeah,
I mean, music was kind of the same thing, especially with like early jazz. You had musicians like the bebop musicians who
mm,
essentially created an entirely new language of music, and that era kind of came and went, and there are still people who play that kind of music still trying to decode the messages, but the longer the longer we get away from that era, the more we're finding out how much information these guys had. So it's
mm,
interesting that in the early 1900s there was so much wisdom being shared and just left for us to decipher. It's kind of like the literary pyramids or something, It's just they
mm.
just dropped it on us. Now we got to figure out the rest for ourselves.
Exactly, it's funny too because on the topic of your namesake being the Royal Cusp, that I attribute to the fact that we were just coming out of the age of Pisces, going into the age of Aquarius in the Great Year cycle, or the Kali Yuga, or the
Yeah.
Yuga cycle in general. Those the really that energy shift all throughout, getting both of the world wars, and we went through Hitler, we went through the Cold War, we went through all these very strange events, and then we had kind of like that hippy dippy age in the 60s and 70s where a lot of this stuff started to culminate, and people started to use the words, the phrases like the age of Aquarius more prominently,
Right.
and that all I think had to do with us kind of starting to feel the very first intricacies of this brand new way of living that's going to basically take precedent for the next 2,000 years. And I
Yeah,
think
we're
that,
just getting
yeah,
started. We're just getting
exactly. We're
started.
we're really, it's going to be conversations like the ones that we're having right now, Carlos, that are going to shape the groundwork for the future, because these types of informations are going to be more well known. They're already starting to blow up in their own right, but it's only going to become a matter of time before everybody is on the same page
I agree,
worldwide.
100%. I
Yeah.
think, if even from an astrological perspective, I've been really looking at Neptune going into Aries,
Mm.
in I think it's 2025 or 2026,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm really um, seeing a lot of this hidden information, the occult knowledge, esoteric information, really starting to bubble up in the
Mm.
Piscean world of the underground, and the podcasts and social media, but still very hidden. It's not,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it hasn't burst through to the mainstream yet. I think we've seen shades of it with just kind of the general commercialism based around astrology,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that the understanding of this information and how it actually applies to us, I really do think Neptune going into Aries is going to be the beginning of a lot of this information getting on stage. I always see Aries as the stage. It's the
Mm-hmm.
sign of birth, and that's when things manifest into the physical, and at least initially. So I really do see a lot of this stuff coming into the mainstream over the next couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
and people really just starting to embed this knowledge into their everyday life, whether it's artists, even whether it's food or um, interior design, or how you name your children, or what you wear, or what you
Mm-hmm.
watch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're already starting to see it, and I
Yep.
think maybe some people, like Hollywood directors or politicians, they never say it, but I do believe that some of them have an idea of what's going on cosmically, because certain things, certain moves just are always aligned with what's going on in the Zodiac as well.
Right.
So, yeah, I see it bubbling up right now. I really do see it bubbling up, and I just want to be a part of it, not as um like a foundational voice or anything like that, but just as a spark to try to get things going, and to try to get that conversation moving. I exist in the hip hop world as a producer. Um, and it's funny because, nobody talks about astrology really, but everyone's low key a fan of it. Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
some sense of their sign, or, Mercury retrograde. So I'm trying to represent myself in a way where I can share this information with people in a way that doesn't feel like I'm trying to sell them on some new age uh psychobabble bullshit,
Mm.
essentially. So I think that's the work right now, is how do we get this information to people who aren't necessarily predisposed to believing in it, or who feel like they either have to believe in it or not believe in it, in order to deal with the information.
Mm-hmm.
I just see this major challenge ahead. So I just want to be involved in that. I want to like try to get this information out there and try
Yeah.
to share it in a way that people can see the value in it more than anything.
Exactly. And I think everybody who feels that energy of wanting to rise up to the occasion of sharing this wisdom into this next era. Again, you're talking about an era that's going to be like, we're literally moving into a time period that is going to groundbreakingly transform the next 2000 or so years. The energy that we're feeling is all it was all basically fated in the stars, all right around the 90s, the 80s, when a lot of these generations were born of today that are going to be carrying the torch into the next era. And a lot of that comes down to not only like the astrological alignments that happened all around the times of our birth, but it's also the energetic shifts of a lot of the slower moving planets. As you mentioned, Neptune is going to be moving out of its element of Pisces into Aries, I believe, right?
Yeah, those
So
are the big ones.
yeah,
Those are the big ones.
yep. Pluto is on its move as far as like a juxtaposition to the United States' founding 250 or so years ago. So
Yeah.
when Pluto gets back into its return, there's often like a death or a rebirth type of situation. Uranus is also known; it moves in a span of about 84 years. That's known as like a big generational marker. And generally, whenever Uranus moves throughout like that 80 or so year cycle, I think it's going into Aquarius soon, or maybe it got out of Aquarius. I don't recall the exact placement, but
Yeah,
wherever it,
Uranus is in it's transiting Taurus right now.
oh, that's
So
where it
it's
is.
it's its next sign will be Gemini.
That's right. So when it moves along its pathways, every 80 or so years, we have like a big scale type of war. So 80 or so years ago, we had World War II. 80 or so years ago, before that, we had the American Civil War, French Revolution. A lot of different types of things happen in those types of periods. 80 years before that, we had the American Revolutionary War. So
Right.
it's so now we're kind of coming up onto this era, the next 10 years, where it's going to be very pivotal. And I love what you said too about wanting to be just a part of sharing and spreading all that wisdom, because that's basically what we're doing. We're putting all these puzzle pieces together. We're trying to do our part in spreading this wisdom. We wrote a whole book about different types of things that revolve around these topics, just to not so that it's super advanced and it confuses people, but just so that people can gauge their interest and dabble in these types of esoteric wisdoms, because there are different things that resonate for different people, but ultimately it's going to be the people who kind of reject these truths that are going to be left behind, so to speak, when we kind of make these major shifts. A lot of people who don't really want to learn anything new, they're ultimately going to be left behind. I mean, the stock market itself it's fundamentally pushed by zodiacal information. So it's almost like a secret language that these people speak. I used to work on Wall Street myself, and when I did, it was something that I quickly picked up on was not talked about in the public eye, but was talked about behind closed doors.
Interesting.
Specifically, the moon. The moon is mainly the biggest marker. They know that.
So what people would talk about it like what like at parties behind closed doors, or kind of just talk
Yeah.
about it. So like how would that work?
So mainly it would be when people were talking about making buying and selling decisions. And it was
Interesting.
it was more so like, I don't think they really knew what the zodiac signs did. I think that maybe the higher ups knew a lot of what that information and those types of things were, but mainly it was like, oh yeah, when the moon is going to go into this position on the 28th or the 31st or the 2nd or whatever, that's when we're going to sell. And they would go based off of where the moon was. Now, a lot of them didn't talk about zodiac. A lot of them just talked about planetary positions and degree
Right.
placements.
Right.
But I don't think that I think that whoever was making those calls in the higher ups they probably knew a lot more about the astrological impacts. I think that most of the lower people who I was hearing this from on the lowest of the totem pole, they were just using the planetary placements. So instead of saying, oh, we're going to do it on this day, they were saying, oh, well, we'll wait until the moon hits this point. And a lot of it had to go off of the moon phases, full moon or new moon or what have you, because if you track the market, you'll find that the common trend is for them to sell on they sell on a full moon, because it freaks people out and people become like paranoid schizophrenics, and they'll all go and they'll sell all their stuff, and then that drives the market down, and they'll buy on a new moon because it's somewhat hidden and it's a really good opportunity to wait until the market's like kind of at a low point, and then they kind of jump the market up by buying into it. And they want to collect in all of that energy. They want to sell on the full moon to like acquire their assets, and they want to buy in on the new moon to harness energies so that those assets that they buy will end up skyrocketing into something new for them. And
Right. Yep.
this is a very common trend that I saw, and I didn't even really know too much about zodiac or anything at that point, but that's really what started getting me interested. They used to, there's a lot of people who say, oh, well, this was like the autobiographer who wrote this or whatever, but there's that famous quote from J.P. Morgan, where it says, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And they would use that quote a lot. They would say that quote a lot, or quotes that are similar to that.
Yeah.
And I realized after kind of leaving that sector of business, because I just did not like it. The people were very cutthroat and etc. I realized, like, wow, this is something that I really got to keep with me, because this is something I recognized was really prominently talked about but wasn't really fully understood. I would ask questions like, why are we doing this? And they'd be like, I don't know. We're just told to do it. Do you want to make money or not? Like, shut up. And so
Yeah.
that's basically the attitude that everybody had. But
Yeah,
ultimately, yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
not surprised at all. I mean, I don't even have to work on Wall Street to come to that conclusion,
Mm,
just from attempting to use astrology to figure out my own path and figure out my own advantages, and using it to make certain moves at certain times for my own career. I've made a lot of mistakes with it. There's been a lot of things that didn't line up, but over time I've been able to figure out what works when, what my houses mean, what they really mean according to what life's telling me.
mm,
And I just got to the point where I'm like, I can't be the only person who knows how to do this.
right.
you know, because even with the little bit that I know, excuse me, let me get a sip of water. Even with the little bit that I know, um, I've been able to actually like gain an advantage in my career. I've been able to use astrology to my advantage, and it's been working out great. And so, I could just look at the world around me. Like, I cannot be the only person out of billions of people who understands this. There has to be people who know this, and they're just not talking about it, or they're just using it, and they're, building their wealth or doing whatever they have to do with it.
Yeah, and that's I think going to be one of the big reasons why I say people will get left behind if they don't start adopting this information. Once people start realizing that there's secret codes that the elite use to communicate with each other, and
Yeah,
those codes mainly revolve around rituals and symbology. They do these little, dog and pony shows on television, on live television, on specific days to lock in specific energies, and then they do specific things. Because they're enacting a lot of these different occult rituals that they're trying to.
yeah, they're doing it
Yeah.
in movies and music
Mm-hmm.
videos and TV shows, and
Yep.
um,
Yep.
probably a lot of the same language used in those rituals too are used to, describe how to put together, a TV show.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised.
Yeah.
I don't work in the world of TV or movies, but I see it all the time.
Mm.
And it's really interesting. Like, I don't, I would disagree slightly. I don't think people have to necessarily understand this stuff to get with the program. I
Mm-hmm.
think certain people either naturally are making the right decisions or are naturally predisposed to um, approaching life a certain way at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of things are also kind of obvious, like, for example, Age of Aquarius, or
Mm-hmm.
obviously the internet, technology, social media, the whole world's connected.
Mm-hmm.
You have this giant network of all these diverse pieces coming together. Doesn't take an astrologer to realize that the future is going to be in this connectivity and in
Mm-hmm.
building your network and being able to communicate with somebody across the world in order to create something new, or in order to make money, or in order to build a social network, whatever the case may be. Um, so I think we're all naturally moving towards it. I think the thing that all this information helps with is being able to be on the front lines of it, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Like,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what's coming and sort of positioning yourself to be a part of that. So I think other people who don't really follow astrology, or who don't really care about this stuff, or who are skeptical about it, they can easily, succeed and be a part of whatever's going on. But I think in order to really be creative on the front lines, pushing things forward, you have to have some idea of what's coming next. Or else you're just relying on yourself, and you're just relying on your own ideas of what can happen.
Mm.
So, if, like, to me, that's the big question. Are people following this, or are they not?
Right.
And everything in me wants to say no, nobody is, that there's just people who are smarter than others, or people who are taking bigger risks than others. But the more I look at it, the more I do see a pattern that aligns with the Zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
So, I still think we're in this gray area. I don't know if in my lifetime it's ever going to be too obvious,
Mm-hmm.
but do you know what I mean? Like, I think
Yes.
certain people can still, like, and I've learned this with music, where I went to music school. I went to Berklee College of Music. I went
Mm.
to New School in Manhattan to study composition. I've been through all the music education programs in high school and all that. And just because you know everything there is to know about music theory doesn't mean you're going to make great music, right?
Right.
And then so I'll come across people who are young, who've never taken a music class in their life, who really get it. They
Mm.
know how to make great music,
Mm.
but they couldn't tell you what notes are in the chords that they're playing, or they couldn't tell you how many bars the song was,
Mm.
or
Mm-hmm.
what their form was, or what the harmonic rhythm of the music was. Like, they couldn't tell you any of that stuff,
Mm.
but they make the best music in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's two sides of it. There's people who naturally live in a way that's aligned with the cosmos, who don't need to necessarily intellectualize any of it. And then I think there's people like me who do need to intellectualize it to actually apply it.
Mm.
because without it, I'm just total chaos. And I
Really,
think,
yeah, no, that's really well said, and I love what your point was. I want to expand on what I meant earlier too. So yeah, totally fair point. Everything that you said is 100% right. The way that we live our lives today, I don't think people need to understand the zodiac for their own personal limitations or understanding their own personal archetypes to the fullest degree. I think that there are some people who, because everything is an energy thing, right? Including the zodiac. The way that the energy from the space radiation of the different quadrants that we've kind of adapted to the sky and the archetypes that we've placed alongside those little
right.
vectors of the sky, they're bleeding energy into the ionosphere of the Earth. They're bleeding energy through these planetary objects, which essentially act like mirrors or portals or something along those lines that shift and send all of these waves of energy towards the Earth that effectively make a ton of things, like how people react to things and such, or even within their own birth chart. I think I was telling you, you can look at somebody's life. You can really peer through somebody's soul, especially if you have their time of birth. If you have all of the specifications, you can basically walk through somebody's life and say, okay, well, you had a major event happen around this age,
Yeah,
and they'll say, wow, how did you know that? I'm like, well, because the math doesn't really lie, and there are things that are. It goes back to what your initial thing that you said was, which was, are people really living by this? Is it fate? Or do we have free will? And the the,
yeah,
the, the answer is both. And I want to expand on what I mean by that. So from my view, from all of the things that I've done, I've realized that basically there's two things. You have destiny and fate. Destiny is like your own personal thing, but fate is something that is kind of chosen for you. Fate is like you have a board that's kind of like with all these blank spaces, and destiny is you get to fill in the spaces, but you can't avoid the fact that those spaces are there, and you have to go one by one by one. It's the same way of how everybody's born a child and we all grow into old age, hopefully. Well, the whole
yeah.
point of what I'm getting at is it's our personal choices, but this is kind of where zodiatry comes into play, because this is actually our big thing. I know you use a lot of the zodiac for a lot of the more advanced purposes. One of the things that we use the zodiac for, including those advanced purposes, is alchemy. So spiritual and physical alchemy. So what we've done in our book and in our studies, and this is actually something I think I'm sharing with you for the first time, we found that the planetary objects controls the body's process of healing. So this is where I'm really getting into what I meant by the people who kind of don't learn at least a little bit about this stuff will get left behind. We're seeing
Interesting.
we're seeing a massive amount of oh, it says we got some time left. Yeah, we got 10 minutes left. Perfect. We're seeing a massive amount of our societies are kind of shifting gears towards not wanting to help people and instead wanting to harm people in many different ways. And it can mean whatever that means. There's the water and the food, for example, is not necessarily up to par with really what it should be for our
Yeah,
bodies. There's the whole topic of pharmaceutical drugs that we could get into, but that's like a whole side thing. Basically, we're seeing a lot less salad shops on every corner. We're seeing a lot more liquor stores and McDonald's. That's basically what we're seeing.
yeah,
Ultimately, though, I think that when what we've discovered over the last 10 or so years that we've been studying a lot of this stuff is that the human body, and it's very just like the zodiatry is very different from each person. The cycles for their alchemical healing is different for every person, and that basically goes off of zodiatry. That goes off of like your main natal chart of when you were born. And what we've found is like a lot of alchemy related things, like turning lead into gold. These are actually analogies. Philosopher's Stone, Holy Grail. These are all analogies for different ways in which the human body heals. Specifically, the way that the body undergoes this massive mitosis related healing process. Mitosis, of course, being the splitting of cells. This is the first function that we ever do once we're kind of brought into this world in a metaphysical way, which would
Yep.
be when the sperm hits the egg. We start splitting in half repeatedly. So our body actually does that cycle once roughly every month. The major physical evidence for this is a woman's menstruation cycle, but this also happens within a man's body as well. It's just not as physical. And there's a lot of reasons for that as well. But this is kind of the information that we detail in our book. But either way, yeah. So we found that there are alchemical signatures for which the body heals at specific points of the month or the month, because it's roughly 1 month is roughly one lunar cycle.
Yep.
So each lunar cycle throughout the year, your body basically has one period where it's very weak and you want to avoid doing bad things because it's healing, and then you have one period where you can basically do not whatever you want, but
Get away with anything.
You
Yeah.
can, yeah. It's kind of like that, because really, and I
Yeah.
talk about this a lot. You have a lot of people who are in the spiritual community. They want to be strict vegans and they don't want to do any drinking or any drugs. They want to have zero sex. And I salute those people. They're very well disciplined, but that's not the way that our bodies are supposed to be maintained. Our bodies are supposed to have a little bit of those bad things, if you want to consider them bad things, but everything is a spectrum and everything is a balance. So you're supposed to, you have to include a little bit of the lower vibrational things in order for your vibrations to ascend higher.
Totally.
So
Totally.
so this is one of the reasons why we work with so many different people, and they want to maintain like this one strict lifestyle, and it's like, no, you're actually supposed to have a plethora of balance and experiences. But you can use astrology to tell you when the best times to do that. Have you ever gotten completely blasted drunk and you wake up the next morning and it's the worst hangover of your life? But then
Oh, yeah, of
maybe
course,
then
yeah.
maybe there's another year where you get completely blasted drunk.
Yeah.
You wake up the next day and you're like, wow, I don't feel hungover at all. There's reasons for
exactly.
that. There's reasons for that. It's not just because you drank a whole bunch of water and ate a bunch of bread the night before. It's because there are times of the month where it's better for you to be able to get completely drunk, or to eat, when you're supposed to eat super healthy, or when you're supposed to avoid having sex the most. Actually, semen retention and sexual abstinence is like a big part of that alchemy part for specific timings of the month, of course. But all of this is part and parcel, right? So there's a wide variety of different things that kind of get into this, so that we don't have all the time for, but essentially that's what I was getting at when I was saying, as we uncover more truths and we get more data. I know, like, for example, Dr. Joe Dispenza has been I've been recently doing podcasts with people who work with and know him personally, and he has actually been doing scientific case studies on these same types of alchemical things related to pineal glands and activation and breath work and meditation and Kundalini and all these other buzzwords. But essentially, there are definitely ways in which we can track the planetary objects in specific zodiacs, houses, and whatnot, comparative to your own natal chart energies, that will actually allow us to heal or also avoid moments when we're not healing the best. So it
Yeah.
kind of goes both ways. That's really what I'm getting at, because it's not just about making
Yeah,
money.
that's deep stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's really deep.
Yeah.
That I think the challenge is going to be, especially in our lifetime, is going to be how to get that knowledge into the minds of people who aren't looking for it, in a way that's not selling them something, in a way that's not trying to get them to believe something
Exactly.
that they don't want to believe. But how does one, or how does a collective start really getting this information to the hands of the people who need it the most, right? Because yeah, you use it, but at this point you probably don't need it the most because you've been working with this information, right? And it's
Exactly.
the same with me. Like I use
Exactly.
astrology for what I use it for, even in the musical creation process, and it works for me. But I wish I could just press a button and get somebody to try something out for 2 weeks, right?
Right.
Just to
Right.
make sure it works for them. And the challenge is always going to be how to get somebody who's not even looking for this, but who needs this information, to actually listen and to at least try it. And I think that's really the hard part here.
Yeah.
It's not finding the knowledge, it's not coming to these realizations. It's now what?
Right.
Because if you don't present it the right way, then it just like people in the past. It just lives and dies with the person who found it.
Exactly. And then this is the final point because we're running out of time here. That's exactly right. And so mainly that comes from people like us continuing to share this wisdom because the way I love the way you do it, because what you do is you create content that resonates with people.
Yeah,
It's a personal experience for those who are watching your videos. They don't have to have all the right zodiacal energy to get what you're saying. You know, it's all about doing their own research, finding and discovering those things about themselves, and saying,
exactly.
hey, it
Yeah.
isn't a coincidence. There are things that make sense. And you know, just for everybody, one of the last points I want to make for everybody going at home, don't go off of like the really basic horoscope stuff, because that's there purposefully to be confusing. Like you really got to get deep with your understanding and teach. I know Carlos has probably spent years and years and years researching this stuff. It's not easy. There's a lot of science to it. You have to get really deep into it and find it. It's not just going to be you googling one thing and being able to pull it up real quick.
Yeah.
There's a lot more effort that needs to go into it. It's not just like your sun sign or anything like that. There's a lot that goes into it. But
And
either
it's
way,
it's tough. It's tough.
yeah.
Anytime, and I know this from experience, anytime you try to talk about the zodiac as a whole, you run into obstacles. You run into
Mm,
conundrums and contradictions that make you want to erase everything you've written.
yeah.
And so I think something for that everyone really should understand is just that humans in general, when they cross these obstacles, especially when they really want to get something done, like a website or a book or a website or whatever, or a video,
Mm,
they're going to just barrel through those obstacles and kind of, figure it out later.
mm,
And so, you have to take things with a grain of salt. Like, I think it's good to listen to as many people as possible and try to deduce your own version of
mm,
reality. But yeah, people will, just for the sake of wanting to get the thing done, will skip over certain contradictions. And I think really the zodiac is so much more complex and indecipherable than a lot of people make it. That's why I say I'm not a master astrologer. To me, it's almost impossible to get there in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, because
yeah.
it's such a maze. It's such a cryptic, there's so many symbols involved with it and so much mythology involved with it that it really
Mm,
takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to really figure out what's going on.
it
And I
does.
certainly haven't gotten there, and I haven't met anyone who's really got the perfect grasp of
Yeah,
the
nobody's
zodiac.
got a perfect one,
Yeah,
and also as you get more in tune with it, you have more power and control over it than the energies do. That was going to be my final point, but it
I love it.
looks like we're here wrapped up on time. So I will say thank you so much, Carlos. I really appreciate it. I'm going to make sure that I plug in all of your social media on the bottom, so go check out Carlos, and then I'm going to message you. I'll message you on Instagram too, and I'll make sure that I get this audio podcast emailed over to you once we're done editing it and everything. Then you can do whatever you want with it. But we'll be posting it on our channel probably in the next couple weeks. But thank you so much, Carlos, once again. I really appreciated chatting with you. And many blessings to you, my friend. We should definitely get you on on another podcast so we can chat.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.